Welcome to the Easton School Committee virtual meeting of Thursday, January 28th, 2021. It's 5 o'clock. This meeting is being broadcast on ECAT, Facebook Live, over a Zoom platform. When you send in a question on the chat, please write your name and address and then send in your question. And other than that, it's as usual. Okay. First up is to read and accept executive session meeting minutes. And we have a bunch of them. Okay, first one. September 10th, 2020. Are there any questions, comments, corrections? Okay, seeing none, do I have a motion to accept the executive session meeting minutes of Thursday, September 10th, 2020?
Star, so moved.
And I need a second.
O'Neill, second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
O'Neill, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next, executive session meeting minutes from Thursday, September 24th, 2020. Any comments, questions, or corrections? Okay, seeing none, do I have a motion to accept these minutes and not release them? I should have said that on the last one, so I didn't. But
Wiseman, so moved.
I need a second.
Star, second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
O'Neill, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
Thank you. The next minutes we're looking at, executive session meeting minutes, Thursday, October 8th, 2020. Any comments, questions, or corrections? Okay, I'll make the motion to accept but not release these minutes. Do I have a second?
Wiseman, second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
O'Neill, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
Thank you. The next executive session meeting minutes are from Thursday, November 12th, 2020. Are there any comments, questions, or corrections? Seeing none, do I have a motion to accept these minutes without release?
O'Neill, so moved.
Wiseman,
Star,
second.
second.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor?
O'Neill, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
Thank you. And finally, the executive session meeting minutes from Thursday, January 14th, 2021. The date has already been corrected on the first line, so that is fixed. Are there any other comments, questions, or corrections on these minutes? Do I have a motion to accept these minutes without release?
Wiseman, so moved.
O'Neill, second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
O'Neill, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Next, we have discussion and vote on Fall 2 wedge season. Dr. Cabral.
Thank you. As you are well aware, we have had some disruptions to many programs this year, one of which, of course, has been sports. The fall season has been moved, or some sports from the fall season was moved to what is being called the wedge season, or Fall 2 season, and that begins on February 22nd. As he has done with all of the season protocols and procedures for safety thus far, the athletic director, Bill Matthews, is here to go over this with you and see if you have any questions, concerns for him before he implements this in the district. Mr. Matthews?
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me on the call. I would like to say that I'm very thankful for the support that we've had from the administration and from the school committee for athletics. although we've had a lot of quarantines in athletics for the winter season, I have yet to come across a case where we've had a spread as a result of athletics. It's happened somewhere else, and then one of our team members is diagnosed, and then the rest of the team has to quarantine as a result. So I feel very comfortable that our coaches are doing an excellent job implementing the protocols that are in place. And I think that we're in a little bit of a rough patch, although we're, knock on wood, coming out of it now. Some of the teams coming out of quarantine and getting back into action. And hopefully we'll be able to continue out the season. We only have a couple more weeks left in this season. So we put together the plan for fall 2. I am waiting anxiously for the MIAA to provide the sport-specific guidance that they do for each season. My understanding is that will be released tomorrow, and the guidance that they provide there, like with previous seasons, are guidance that we will implement with our coaches. It seems that they are well designed and have worked very well, so that's what our plan would be. We do want to offer volleyball and football, which were 2 sports that were canceled or postponed in the fall season. Indoor track was postponed because the Reggie Lewis Center is closed and will remain closed. So the indoor track plan now becomes an outdoor winter track plan. But the league feels pretty strongly that we want to provide an opportunity for these athletes to participate, and we feel that we can do it. Probably we're going to have to work around the weather a little bit on that, but I think as the weather gets nicer, we will be able to offer a pretty robust athletic opportunity for them. And then cheer is really a big question mark at this point. We believe what they're going to offer is, I believe it's called sideline cheer, which really is more related to kind of the old classic cheer with supporting a team on the sideline. But we haven't seen what form that is going to take at this point. We don't know if it's going to include competition or not. But the proposal that I have here is to follow the guidance that is provided by the MIAA. Actually, in the case of cheer, it's the MSSAA. So that is the overall plan. Everything else, although adjusted for this particular season, some minor tweaks on it, but otherwise pretty much the same plan that we've had with the other seasons, other than the beginning part in regards to which sports we will be offering. So with that, I will turn it over to you and field any questions that you might have.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Matthews? No? Jennifer?
I do. Is there any concern, particularly with football, about the turf being frozen or too firm for them to play on it safely?
There hasn't been any concern for that. The way that the turf field is set up, that unless we get unusual weather conditions with freezing, thawing, et cetera, that the turf should be able to attenuate any kind of shock because of the pad that's underneath it. If we do end up with a layer of ice, we would certainly either have to try to clear that by hand or cancel practice. And I think as we go into the season as athletic administrators, we have all discussed the fact that we're just going to have to be flexible like we have with these other seasons. If the weather isn't conducive for practice, it isn't safe, then, we'll just have to cancel and wait until we can. And all of the other teams that we are participating with are taking very similar approaches.
Okay, thank you. And then sort of a related question. So winter track would be would be more similar to spring track, like track and field, or just, what is it? It's not like cross country, right? It would be using the track surface?
We'd be using the track surface and offering, to the best of our ability, the events that would be offered in indoor track. So it would be scaled down a little bit, like the discus and javelin are not thrown indoor. So those would be events that we wouldn't field for that. But a lot of the other events, like there's still some details being worked out about the hurdles, 55-meter hurdles. Is that what we'll do, or will we adjust that a little bit? But I think that the coaches and the administrators are all of the mindset that we can come up with something that works. There's a reasonable chance that the meets for the winter track season will be virtual because of the number of athletes that are involved in a number of the teams. It would be hard to put everybody together, but at least it will give them the opportunity to participate in an athletic program.
Okay, and so the track surface itself, even in very unusually cold weather or colder weather than it's normally used on for track purposes, that's considered safe and okay for the athletes?
Yes, as long as there's not a sheet of ice on it, it'll be fine. Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Caroline?
Could you talk a little bit about volleyball? That's my big concern because it's indoors with a lot of exertion. Can you talk about how you're going to make that as safe as possible?
I have not had an opportunity to look at the adjustments or the modifications that the MIA has come out with, but I do know that a number of other leagues have fielded volleyball in the fall. The Patriot League, which would include Hingham, Duxbury, those schools, they did field volleyball teams, and to my knowledge, they didn't run into any problems with that this fall. My understanding from one of the members of the COVID-19 task force at the MIAA has indicated that they're actually relaxing some of the restrictions that they had implemented in the fall for volleyball. And I think that everything that they have done so far has been based upon experience and observing what has transpired with other, with sports so far. So I think that if they are in fact relaxing those things a little bit, I think it would be indicative of the fact that they haven't run into any kind of problems with volleyball at this point. So I feel like if we can play basketball, volleyball is actually less contact with the other team. There's a little contact at the net, although you're not touching one another. In basketball, there's actually physical contact. So I think from a sports standpoint and a comparison, volleyball is a sport that I would consider to be much safer to play actually than basketball is.
Well, I have to admit, I swallowed a lot of hesitancy about basketball because I remember early on one of the Johns Hopkins epidemiologists talked about basketball as being a gift to the coronavirus. So, I think that it is reassuring to think in terms of volleyball being safer. But, I always find it interesting when people say, well, things went well with the restrictions we had in place, so let's relax them. It's like, well, let's now take more of a risk. I mean, I'm not quite sure. We always talk about aiming for the ceiling instead of the floor in Easton. It seems as though if those volleyball restrictions were working, it doesn't necessarily make sense to relax them. Of course, we don't have specifics yet, as you pointed out, so I can't really address any reaction that I might have to the specifics, but I'm wondering if it would make more sense if it worked well in the fall for those districts to just continue with the stronger restrictions. I don't see why we would say, well, let's take a chance and see what happens with looser restrictions. It's a sort of an interesting question about why we kind of relax things when things are working well. But anyway, that's just my comment about it. But maybe we ought to consider keeping, at least at the initial part of the initial couple of weeks, the stronger restrictions, just to see how things go. Just a thought.
I think that the other athletic administrators in the league have been very diligent about this. And I think that once those modifications are released, that there'll be a pretty robust discussion about it. And it will be, will they move it just a little bit, a few things that are fine-tuned a little bit, or is it something that will be a major change? And I think if they're a major change, we would have the same concerns that you have, Caroline. So I think that we'll screen it pretty carefully.
Just as an aside, I assure you I love basketball. I just remember that quote so strongly about it being a gift to the virus, but it's actually kind of my favorite sport to watch. Anyway, not that anybody cares. Thank you very much, Bill. That was helpful.
All right, thank you.
Is there any other questions for Mr. Matthews? Okay. Do we have does somebody want to make a motion to accept the wedge season and the protocols for winter 2020, 2021?
Star, so moved.
And do I have a second?
O'Neill second.
All those in favor?
O'Neill, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr. Matthews.
Thank you.
Okay. Vote to accept donation of books from Target of Easton. Dr. Cabral.
Thank you. We are pleased to present two donations this evening, actually. Assistant Superintendent Chrissy Pruitt will discuss the first. It's a donation of books from Target of Easton. Ms. Pruitt?
Thank you. Just sharing some pictures for you to see. So we were very fortunate the other day. Jaleesa Allen, the human resource manager from the Easton Target, stopped by with a donation of 20 books focusing on Black History Month for February. And we are asking for your acceptance of this donation so that we can distribute them to our schools as soon as possible. If anybody is interested in these books, they are available at Target for purchase. So we were very fortunate and looking forward to a continued partnership with Target of Easton.
Okay, that's very nice. Are these books going to each level? Are they one level?
Yeah, so Julie Shine, my administrative assistant, and I broke them up according to level. And we were able to allocate the books per school, K through 8. The high school is not receiving a donation at this time. It's strictly pre-K through 8, actually, pre-K.
Thank you. Any other questions? No questions?
No, fantastic.
All right. I'll make a motion that we accept this donation of books from Target of Easton with joy.
O'Neill second.
All those in favor?
O'Neill, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
Okay, thank you. The next one is vote to accept donation from ExxonMobil to EMS. Dr. Cabral.
Thank you. The next donation is for Easton Middle School. The Global Partners, who is in partnership with the ExxonMobil Education Alliance program, has donated $500 to the Easton Middle School to be used specifically for a STEM area, science, technology, engineering, or math. Easton Middle School is, of course, very appreciative of that, and we'll report back what they were able to purchase. With that, they've made very good use of the donations in the past, and certainly STEM is an area where they could use additional funds. So we are extremely appreciative to ExxonMobil for this donation.
Does anyone have any questions? Do I have a motion to accept this ExxonMobil donation to EMS?
Wiseman, so moved.
Do I have a second?
Star, second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
O'Neill, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
Thank you very much. Personnel change, retirement, OA school nurse. Dr. Cabral.
So we have all of our Ames school nurses has submitted her intention to retire. Judy Josephs came to the Easton Public Schools in August of 1996, first as a long-term sub. She was then appointed as a 0.5 school nurse. 0.5 for us is a 50%. Think of it as a 50% position. 0.5 school nurse position for Center Intermediate School in North Easton Grammar School. She worked at the Center School until 1998 when she moved to the Richardson Olmsted School. Following a 1-year leave of absence to obtain her master's degree at the Boston College Graduate School of Nursing, she returned to Richardson Olmsted as a 60% school nurse, where she remained until 2018. Judy was transferred to Oliver Ames in 2019 as an 80% school nurse, where she remains today. She plans to retire on June 30th after spending 25 years with the Easton Public Schools. As you can imagine, it has been a challenging year for everyone, but our school nurses certainly are on the front lines of dealing with our students who are COVID positive, have symptoms, have been struggling, have had concerns about having symptoms of COVID. So it's a very challenging position, and they've been doing a wonderful job. We're very, very fortunate for all of our school nurses. As most of our Easton community will know, our school nurses are very involved with our students on a personal level, our families, and our staff. We do not have a lot of turnover in our nursing department, and we benefit from that because they get to know everyone very well in the community. So Ms. Josephs is no exception. She's an extraordinary nurse and a wonderful school nurse and colleague, and we wish her the best in her retirement. She is not able to join us this evening, but you do have her letter for reading.
Dear Dr. Cabral, I would like to inform you that I will be retiring effective June 30th, 2021. I have enjoyed working as a school nurse for the Easton Public Schools for the past 25 years. While I look forward to my retirement, I will miss working with my colleagues, especially the professional and excellent nursing department. Thank you for the opportunity to serve the students and staff of the Easton Public Schools. Sincerely yours, Judith Josephs. And I've had the pleasure to work with Judy. I was never in her school when she was a nurse, but she's been on several negotiation teams and, just seeing her in the neighborhood. So she's a wonderful woman, and we wish her the best. Does anyone else want to make any comments about? Go ahead, Jen.
So when my kids were at RO, they were, my kids are generally frequent flyers at nurses' offices. They just love them. Sometimes they just need a little TLC or a snack or something. So she was definitely one of the ones who saw my kids pretty frequently, just to say hi and get a little pack of peanut butter crackers or something, or whatever crackers they serve. And another thing, I was on the PTA at RO, and we had a small stipend where we would reimburse the nurses because they would buy some supplies, snacks and things like that, to keep in the office for the kids. And so, she was thinking about her kids, vacations, weekends, shopping at BJ's, would see something good on sale, and to get those receipts and do the reimbursement. So she was just always thinking of the kids and just figuring out what little TLC they would need to kind of get through the day and get back into class. So I really appreciated that.
Thank you, Jen. Does anyone else want to make a comment? Go ahead, Caroline.
I actually knew Judy better years ago, but I will say that she's one of the most intelligent, well-informed people that I've ever known. I remember talking to her about so many things, not necessarily medically related, but I think we were fortunate to have someone who was that knowledgeable working for us for all those years.
Very good. All right. I would like to make a motion to accept with regret the retirement of Judy Josephs. Do I have a second?
O'Neill, second.
All those in favor?
O'Neill, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. And congratulations, Judy. You will be missed. Next is the 2021-2022 school calendar second reading. Dr. Cabral.
At the last school committee meeting, you reviewed 3 drafts of the school calendar for next year. Drafts 1 and 2 have been taken off of the table just due to some overlapping with some Jewish holidays that we don't wish to have any conflict with. Draft 3 has been changed to draft 3A and 3B. You'll see there's only one difference between the two, and that is the professional development day that we discussed at the last school committee meeting. So I had said that I would speak to the cabinet about this, which of course we did. You'll see draft 3A maintains the professional development day on November 12th, the day after Veterans Day, to provide a 4-day weekend for families. There was fantastic feedback from the school committee that maybe we would want to consider moving that to October 12th because November already has several days out of school. So draft 3B is the same iteration of the calendar, simply moving that day to October. I will report that after discussing it with the cabinet, they did ask me to move forward with the recommendation in November. While they agree that there are 4 or 3 days off and 1 half day already in November, they had a concern that if there was a day off on a Thursday and then there was class on Friday and then a weekend, traditionally what we've seen is that is a big day for attendance issues, and they felt that what it would really amount to was another day of some lost time with students. Now, it's not going to make or break the school year. If you feel very strongly about it, certainly we can go with iteration 3B, but that was the recommendation you asked me to get for you, the feedback, and so these are the 2 remaining schedules before you. If you have any questions or comments about that before you move forward with your vote.
Are there any questions? Okay. So does somebody want to make a motion?
I think Caroline had a question or a comment.
Oh,
It's
sorry,
not really a
Caroline.
question. I just have to say that I agree with the very strong likelihood that if we had just a kind of single Friday off after, have a single Friday back in school after a Thursday holiday, that we'd have attendance might be low, but in addition to that, there's sort of an attentional issue, I think, when you have a 4-day period where there's just 1 day in the middle of it that's not part of the holiday. So even though I think Jen's point last time was very well taken, that seems like November is a kind of the month with a lot of holes in it for the school days. I would also support the November Professional Development Day.
Okay, any other questions? Jen, go ahead.
Yeah, just a comment. I appreciate you taking it back to the cabinet, and their feedback makes sense. And I support the first version as well, with keeping it in November for the reasons you stated.
Thank you for bringing it up.
With them. Thank
I
you.
think it was a valuable conversation for us to have, so I appreciate you bringing that up at the last meeting.
Do I have a motion to accept, I guess, draft 3A, the one that has professional development, November 12th?
O'Neill, so moved.
Do we have voting for that on the agenda?
Yeah? No? Oh, I thought we did. So do we just have to choose, but don't we have to choose?
I think probably the intent was to have it as a vote because it was the second reading. Well, I don't know though. It is the second reading of the options anyway.
You can choose one this evening and vote on it at the next meeting if you'd like, if you're more comfortable with that. We typically write it as second reading, but your point is well taken that it doesn't explicitly say vote.
I'm fine if how it's written is convention, then no objection there. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't doing anything that we aren't allowed to.
No, it's a good point. We can certainly do that if you'd like. We could move ahead with publicizing it to the staff so that they have it and you can move toward it at your next meeting. It's entirely up to you.
Okay.
We won't send it out to families, of course, until there's a vote, but.
All right,
so but families are kind of eager to have the information based on some comments that I've seen. I think second reading, sort of from a, as Jen put it, a traditional standpoint, is it's assumed there's a vote. Occasionally, the vote is postponed because there is still perhaps some disagreement. But I would certainly say that we have a consensus. But without a vote, we can't really send it out to families. So I think that it wouldn't be a cardinal sin if we were to vote and then find out later that we should have said that we were voting. Then we'll just vote it again. I mean,
Right.
that would be the penalty, would be to have to revote it. So I think in consideration of families who are anxious to have the calendar, we should go ahead.
Okay. So draft 3A with the November PD on the 12th of November is the one that the school committee would like to accept. Is that correct? Right? Okay.
Right.
So we'll vote for it today, and if need be, we'll vote for it at the next meeting also. So I just made the motion. Do I have a second?
Wiseman, second.
All those in favor?
O'Neill, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Sorry, yes.
Thank you, everybody. Next is the 2021-2022 schedule of school committee meetings, first reading.
This is the first reading, and so no vote will be taken on this for the 2021-2022 school committee schedule of meetings for your review. If you have any questions or recommended changes, the next meeting will be your second reading and vote.
Okay. Does anyone, okay, go ahead, Caroline, sorry.
I'm just wondering, of course, we're all very much hoping that everyone's vaccinated and that things are much closer to normal by September, but I'm just wondering if we should have an asterisk next to the locations that are listed, that if the governor's emergency order is still in place, that we would continue to have the meetings remotely. Does that make sense? Right now, it's listed as Simmons Lecture Hall, and of course, we're all very much hoping that it's safe to do that. But September could be too early to assume that, or October. So I'm just thinking maybe we could put an asterisk next to at least the first half dozen dates, that it will be dependent on whether the emergency order is still in place. Because then, remote meetings would still be obviously recommended at that point. What do you think?
That makes sense, Caroline. And I think we just have to go, with what's happening at the moment, because nobody wants to be put in harm's way either. So, and actually the first meeting is July 22nd, never mind September.
Right, September, you're right, and that's quite early.
So, let's see what's going on, and but at least for the dates, make sure those are right, and then we can put, like you said, put the asterisk with Zoom meeting or whatever it happens to be. Okay.
You could even put a sentence under the title, to the effect that all meetings will be, based on whether the governor's order regarding the coronavirus still exists, that we would have the meetings remotely, something like that. But what do you think, Leisha and Chrissy?
That's fine with us. We'll be wherever your meetings are, so we have no problem with whatever you want to do.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. So next meeting, we'll do the second reading with a vote. All right. Anybody else? Okay. Next up is vote to approve superintendent goals. Dr. Cabral.
At our last meeting, we did review, or I did review, did an overview of my goals for your approval. So this is the next reading, and if you are prepared to vote, you can vote this evening, but certainly if you have any questions, the intent was to give you the opportunity, unlike the goals of really anyone else in the district, and for good reason, obviously, they are, there's a lot more involved and they're quite lengthy. So I wanted to give you the opportunity to read through them carefully and let me know if you have any questions or concerns or recommended changes to focus on a different area or all of the above. So it's up for your consideration for a vote this evening, or we can push it off if you want me to make any more substantive changes.
Are there any questions or comments for Dr. Cabral and the goals? I'm not sure if Caroline's ready to ask a question. She looks like she is.
No, I'm sorry, I
okay.
was just trying to adjust something on the computer.
Okay. Do I have a motion to accept the superintendent goals for 2020, 2021 for Dr. Cabral?
Wiseman, so moved.
Do I have a
O'Neill
second? Thank you.
O'Neill seconds.
All those in favor?
O'Neill, yes.
DeLuca, yes?
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
Thank you. Next, hybrid model classroom observations. Dr. Cabral.
Okay. This is a continuation about our discussion about our very unusual year. As you know, our staff has just been tremendous in their efforts so far this year. And one of the unfortunate side effects of the pandemic is the amount of time that we are able to be in all of the buildings with everyone, which has been limited, unfortunately. To remedy that, we wanted to make sure that we were well aware of what was happening with the rollout of this very different and very challenging model for our staff. And so you will remember that Chrissy Pruitt was, we worked hard to free her up for several weeks so that she could really immerse herself in every single building, some full days, several hours at a time. Very rarely went in for less than 1 or 2 hours, but mostly spent full days. And so she has prepared her summation of her observations and what she's seen for you, and she'd like to present that to you this evening.
So good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share with you some observations that I found throughout my travels. I just want to point out, as we know, the COVID-19 global pandemic has undoubtedly altered the way that we educate our children. When you walk into a classroom, a typical collaborative classroom where students are conversing and working together and sharing materials has been put to a halt as we have been navigating the new normal of social distancing, mask wearing, plexiglass dividers. And just just to kind of provide a background, even though I know our committee doesn't necessarily need it, we spent the summer, the Teaching and Learning Subcommittee were tasked to create an educational model that would serve all students, whether they were in person or remote. We didn't have a playbook. We didn't have any other district to learn from. We didn't have any knowledge of what we were about to enter, except for our experience in the spring, which we knew we had to alter. So we decided to come up with the current model that we are in, our hybrid model, where our students are, the model is focused on continuous learning, and our students are either remoting into the classroom or in-person learning. So quickly we found, as we began this process and had our professional development during the first few weeks of schools, teachers were sharing immediately their struggles and concerns. Many of you received letters from teachers. They were having to overplan, anticipate what was going to happen weeks in advance, which was limiting the teachable moments that they're used to incorporating. Students were struggling at home adapting to this model. Teachers noted that students at home were having difficulty engaging. At the elementary level, parents were participating in class as they were helping their child at home, which was interrupting instruction and taking time away from the already limited time. Teachers were using terms like not sustainable, losing kids, burnout, and more. So we knew that I needed to get into classrooms and see what was going on firsthand, because we were hearing them, we were talking to our administrators, but actually seeing it firsthand, we knew that in order to truly understand what our teachers were going through, I needed to see it in action. So I did spend 18 days in 21 different classrooms. I was very excited. These observations were in grades kindergarten through grade 12. I did not have any volunteers from preschool. However, that's okay because our preschool model, due to enrollment, had the option for students to go in person full time. So that the restrictions that we had at preschool were different than the restrictions we had K through 12. So I spent 18 days visiting classrooms. Teachers reached out to me to see the model in action, and I also reached out to staff and asked for volunteers so I could get a true understanding of what was happening. 26 teachers offered to have me observe, and it was important to gain an understanding from kindergarten through grade 12, both in person and remotely. And I was also observing co-teaching as well as looking at facilitation, as well as that varied throughout the district. So as I began my observations, the immediate observations were that, schools just didn't look the same. Students that in our early elementary grades that were used to collaborative learning spaces now had individual spaces that they were required to stay in throughout the day. We had dividers in between teachers and students. And dividers where students are used to being very close to a teacher as they provide that one-on-one direction for their learning. We had stickers on floors where directing traffic, and also where students had to stand. And one observation I made throughout our middle school and high school was the silence, the weird silence that I would hear because of the uncertainty going on in the world, as well as these pieces of cloth that were silencing our children, where they're used to talking in hallways and conversing and socializing. Then we also saw sanitation stations, places where we had to consistently maintain our sanitation, where we were making sure our hands and our hands were clean and our germs were off. And hall monitors monitoring students, ensuring that they were keeping their distance and not entering bathrooms more than one at a time. And these hall monitors were all in all of our schools. So as I entered classrooms, I did make a lot of discoveries and observations. I also want to note that during these observations, our teachers and paraprofessionals and anyone that was around were wonderful at really being honest and sharing their feedback with me. They're very vulnerable as well, and I appreciate that vulnerability, because they put themselves in a position to share something that they weren't certain that was working. And they wanted me to be a part of that and see just firsthand exactly what they were doing. So one of the very first observations that I made was this, there were common themes as I went through each of the schools. And the first theme that I saw was this sense of community in a socially distanced environment that was immediately apparent. Right at the beginning of the year, we the administrative team, the cabinet, spoke with our teachers about the importance of social emotional learning, and spending multiple weeks focusing on this task. We even at the elementary grades purchased Second Step, which is a social emotional program that was funded through our federal funding for the CARES Act, to incorporate and provide that immediate assistance to our students that hadn't been in school for a long time, since March. And immediately, the teachers are implementing these programs and trying to build community. And I saw the building of the community between cohort A, cohort B, and cohort AB, which are our students that are in our schools 4 days a week. The amount of, I don't have a picture up here, and I found it afterwards, and I'm going to I'm going to have to email it to all of you. You know, one of my favorite moments was a kindergarten student who, in one of the classrooms, finished his work and ran while he was in person and ran up to the screen to show his friend at home the work that he had just done. And we have to remember, my observations were back in October and November, and these were, you know, just weeks into school, and already these students felt such a community feeling of being in their classroom. And that's really commendable to our staff, because that was a huge point that they wanted to ensure was happening right away. And building relationships. You know, I think about, you know, one of our middle school teachers here who's playing games with the kids and having competitions and engaging them, and they're interested to going in. She's doing rock paper scissors there with the kids, and they can't enter the classroom until they beat her. And then one of our high school teachers who, you know, was during a high school visit, I noticed a student stop in the doorway to say hi to her teacher, and she shared some laughs and continued on her way. And the teacher said to me, "Oh, I didn't realize she liked me." So obviously, you know, they're pouring all of this emotion to make these connections with the kids, and that was 100% apparent. And as you can see down here, the young learner and her needed some assurance that her assurance was having her doll sit next to her, because she didn't have anyone able to sit next to her on this day in school. So one of the other things that are important to see is we often heard at the beginning how difficult it would be for our staff and students to navigate the virtual aspect of our hybrid model. Yet, as our teachers planned, I saw technology skills taking the center stage of creating that foundation of learning. In the elementary grades, I heard teachers say, "Okay, class, pin me so you can see what I'm doing." And those were our youngest learners, 5, 6, 7 years old. They were immediately taught how to navigate the online world so that they could adapt and access the learning. We saw our teachers buying the selfie, that's a selfie lamp for those of you that don't know, to make sure that their students could see them and really see, you know, their mouth and what was going on in the classroom, so they could see the articulation that a teacher might be sharing. And you can also see, you know, the different masks that the teachers were using to try and enhance anything going on at home. As well as, you know, we saw voice amplifiers. That was another thing that we found. And these are things that our teachers were finding for themselves. You know, oftentimes when a teacher is in school learning how to teach, they have examples. They can go into their practicum and learn from a previous teacher. No one taught this way, so they were having to discover this on their own. And once something worked for one teacher, they would immediately share it with others in their building and be able to make those accommodations. We also saw, you know, the immediate use of breakout rooms. You know, again, commending our teachers for trusting our students to navigate navigate the uncertainty of technology. I was in a 5th grade classroom, and our students were in breakout rooms while the teacher walked around and observed, while the students, both remotely and in person, were they were discussing one of the chapters that they had just read. And although, you know, one student may have been across the room, the other student was at home, and the other student in the back of the room, they were all engaging and having conversations using headphones, and having these opportunities while the teacher was walking around supervising. And then utilizing the platforms, whether it was Pear Deck, Kami, Seesaw, all of these names that are so familiar to us now, yet 6 months ago they were this unknown entity, and now they're just part of our instruction. And then the other thing that I saw was the transformation of lesson plans, and how they went from teachers had to recreate all of their documents that they've had for years and put them into online presentations so that students, both remotely and in person, could access the material. I also noticed the organization and planning that was needed. One thing was clear immediately as I entered every room and learning environment. And in order for this model to be successful, a teacher must be prepared. The organization and planning that I observed surpassed any preconceived notions of what was needed. Our K-2 classrooms, for example, if the students are in person on Monday and Tuesday, they will leave on Tuesday with materials for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Developmentally, students at this age level require more tactile learning experiences. So teachers have to anticipate what materials each child will need, and in many cases, have to individualize materials for their remote learning. When a child is in person, the classroom is designed to have more choices to meet a student's needs. So therefore, sending the child off to be on their own, many of those planning periods had to be around creating more individualized materials to be sent home. And then often in a high school classroom, a teacher will utilize a student solution as a launching place for a lesson. And this type of authentic learning has been limited in this model. So during my observations and conversations with staff, it was stressed time and time again, just how far in advance a teacher needs to plan in order to ensure that the students have the materials. And one thing to point out too was the authentic learning that was missed in labs. So our teacher here is actually doing a lab for the students remotely and in person, performing the lab and having the students observe him perform it, because they can't share materials not only between students but from one class to the next. So it's one thing if they had to share materials, and then the next class is a different content within science. But in this case, this teacher teaches all of the same courses for most of it. So he's not able to share those materials. So that authentic learning has been taken away, and our teachers are constantly trying to plan to think about how can we create more of those authentic learning opportunities. And then another thing was the fear that the technology wasn't going to work. So, creating our online. So, for example, in one of the middle school classrooms, I was observing an online assessment, and the middle school teacher, during the assessment, a few students, and this teacher is very fluent with technology. He had already been transferring his assessments to online assessments pre-COVID. However, the glitch that happened, and some of the students lost their work and lost their assignments. And you see just the frustration that the students are facing, as well as the teacher, because the teacher, doesn't know if the student's going to put in that much effort the second time that they have to retake a test. And you can see here, our teachers are preparing for these unplugged opportunities, because I think it was in the first week of our remote learning, the entire East Coast went down with Verizon was not accessible, as what happened this past week. And so, providing opportunities for the kids that are home, that our youngest learners especially, that will not have no guidance with an educator in front of them, to be prepared for those opportunities. So I also, as you know, in the planning of our model, we had initially hoped to have a facilitator in every single classroom, pre-K through grade 12. And after, our administrators thought everything and tried to piece together, utilizing every single staff member in our building, we just didn't have the staffing to provide a facilitator for every single classroom. Yet what I was happy to see was during my observations in the K-5 classrooms, there was a facilitator in every classroom assisting the classroom teacher. Now, I do know that is not currently the case in all K-5 classrooms, but in the ones that I observed, that was the case. And the facilitator was assisting the teachers with the Google Meets and or within the classroom. I did find in my observations that this is essential for this model to work in kindergarten through second grade, with our youngest learners as they rely more heavily on the teacher in those grades. And therefore, it's reaffirming to see that our youngest learners have that support as the second adult as they navigate this new learning model. I also saw that the facilitator in some cases, as you can see here, was in the classroom, but sometimes they were out of the classroom, and that worked. The facilitator and the classroom teacher, it worked both ways. And I want to point out this picture in the upper left picture. That's one of our kindergarten paras, and I couldn't stop smiling when I saw her, because every time a child came online, she was greeting them by name. She would even quickly pull her mask down to say, "Hi, how are you?" and quickly put it back up, with no kids in the room yet, because the kids hadn't entered in off the buses, because she wanted them to see her smile. And this was just this type of building community, and the importance of every adult in the building, making sure that all children feel comfortable. We found that I saw small group instruction, both remotely and in person. I did participate in a reading specialist lesson as I sat here at my desk, and was able to see a facilitator in action as they were presenting. It was actually one of our reading specialists, as she was facilitating for a second grade classroom. At the secondary level, I did not observe a facilitator with a teacher. With each teacher, I should say. I did at the middle school, but not at the high school. But I felt that due to the level of independence amongst the students, this model was not essential for success at the secondary level. So I just wanted to stress that, we have grown a lot, and I'll get to that in a second, but there are challenges that still remain and will remain for the continuation of this model. So as far as students go, we do still struggle sometimes with engagement, with some students in their engagement. We are still really paying attention to attendance and noting the learning gaps that we're finding. We're finding that the learning gaps aren't necessarily that more kids have learning gaps, but the gaps that were already there are growing even more. And that is a concern that of course we are paying attention to and gathering data as we speak. And also our students, the increased need of social emotional support. So students that we may have deemed typical in pre-COVID are now displaying more needs social emotionally. And I will get to that in a moment as well. And with our staff, our parents are requiring more support, and that is not a bad thing. However, it is taking up a lot more time from our staff than in the past. So the quantity of emails that they're responding to, the number of phone calls that they're responding to, are oftentimes encompassing their planning periods, where they have time dedicated within the day to respond. That's also carved into their nights when they're home, trying to be with their own families. And this is something that we definitely see on a regular basis. And also planning and collaboration. Because this is a new model, I think about my first year of teaching and how much planning went in. Many times we hear our teachers saying that they're like first year teachers again. And the amount of time that they need to plan independently as well as collaboratively is an issue. And the materials that are needed, the materials that they have to plan for, as well as just also really having them focus on their work-life balance. That's really, really important for their own social emotional well-being. So in my observations, I do have 3 recommendations, but I don't think that they're going to be very alarming. As you know, I was fortunate to observe 21 classrooms across 6 schools. And I was able to see what was happening at one grade level in one school, and then go across town and see something else going on just as successfully at the same grade level. I was able to go into classrooms where the same content was being taught, but in various ways. In the immediate, I was able to make immediate recommendations and share practices that I had seen, but this needs to occur more often. Teachers within their content on our grade level need more opportunities to meet and plan. They need to be able to share best practices and what they find to be effective in their work. A simple material that works for one teacher could assist another teacher with that, with what could be hindering her from her planning. And it's also important to note that the level of individual planning that's needed to make this model successful as well. More planning time would allow teachers within their working hours to dedicate to their classroom. Many teachers are up late at night planning for the days and weeks to come, and it's important for us to support the work-life balance for the social emotional needs of our staff. And the other recommendation is around materials. Federal funding has allowed us to provide materials needed for this model. However, teachers continue to find software and physical materials to assist them in their planning and delivery of instruction. And as a district, we should, as we are, continue to support creative ways that our teachers are reaching our students and provide materials as long as funding is available. And then lastly, I want to address that we need more support for our struggling students. We're currently working, the beginning of this week, we had a wonderful presentation from our guidance department and support staff to address the increasing needs of our students that are struggling with mental health issues. We are looking at ways of working with our teachers to support those needs, as well as provide accommodations for students that are really struggling during this time, as we know that number has drastically increased. On the other side of it, we're also noting that as I had mentioned before, the students the gap is growing, and we're exploring options to assist students that are struggling academically with additional time outside of the school day or year potentially. So please look for more information in the coming months as we really try to adapt our model to accommodate all the needs of our students. I just wanted to say thank you. These are all the teachers that had invited me into their classrooms and had conversations with me. The names are here. I don't know if you want me to read them all. I probably should, because they really display their vulnerability, and also not just these teachers, but the paraprofessionals and the administrators and every staff member in passing who was able to have conversations with me and share some of what they have been observing and going through. So Samantha Izzo in kindergarten, Melissa Cordero in kindergarten, Heather Jolly, Maria Elena Police, all kindergarten teachers, Carolyn Sparrow. Lisa Reska's at the bottom of the other side, but I just want to include her in grade 1, Michelle Carroll, Danelle Eaton, Kristen Foote, Catherine Ventry in grade 2, Cindy Olson, Karen Rogers, 2 of our reading specialists, K through 2, Tim Harrington, Heather Lewis, Megan St. Martin, Tim Harrington, Heather Lewis, grade 3, Megan St. Martin, grade 4, Kristen Maffeo, grade 5, Victoria Cleaver, special education, Anne Marie Marcus, special education, Lindsay Allen, special education, Steve Searcy, grade 8, math, Zach Dyer, grade 8 ELA, Maura Richards, grade 8 ELA, Paul Flaherty, Oliver Ames social studies, Nicole Needleman, Oliver Ames math, Katie Walker, Oliver Ames math, Matt Turgeon, Oliver Ames physics. It was a wonderful experience. I feel like I should have them all over my house, when this is over, to celebrate and reflect on what a year. And I just wanted to share that it's important to recognize how far we have come. Just this week, 13 of our teachers shared best practices with the neighboring district's leadership team. Our teachers were proud of the work. Here I go again, I'm gonna start crying again. They were proud of the work that they have been doing in Easton. Our professionals have created a new system for educating our students. They use their creativity, their intelligence, and their commitment to ensure that our students will have the best educational experience given the current circumstances. No one has said that this is easy. And today, our teachers are still struggling, but they really need to be commended for the work that they're doing to provide the best education for our kids. And during this time, I'm starting to hear from the now changing into the new calendar year, I'm hearing more about going back to looking at and focusing again on our strategic plan. Even though they're in this model, they're talking, we had our professional development day around diversity and inclusion and the conversations that the teachers were having. In fact, we did provide extra planning time for them at the end, and they actually spent that time in many cases trying to figure out how to implement more diversity and inclusion into their practice rather than just focusing on the hybrid model. So my findings are here. I do have this all written up in a paper that I can share with all of you once I make some minor adjustments. But this is what I found. This is my experience. I really feel blessed to have been provided this opportunity, and I feel even more proud today than I ever have of our staff and all staff members for the wonderful experiences they're providing for our kids in these unprecedented times.
I just wanted to point out that when we met with that neighboring district, there were grades 6 to 12 teachers as well. I'm not as good as Chrissy. I did not take a picture. I should have. I just want to make sure they're acknowledged as well. So we had PK to 12. Again, just a perfect example, reaching out saying, is anybody willing to talk to staff in another district? They want to talk to teachers and get like real, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We're trying very hard not to ask anyone to do anything extra for obvious reasons. And they all said yes immediately and spent a great deal of time with them. We've also had many other districts that we've been consulting with as a model because of what we have in place. I know, I'm going to talk a little bit later about how our model is being challenged in many ways by parents or community members, or saying we need to be in school more time. There are many factors that go into it, and I still today believe that this is the best model for students, academically and social emotionally. It is not the best model for staff. I keep saying that. This is extremely, extremely trying and difficult. And the recommendations Chrissy talked about are things that we're constantly working on. We do have some ideas that we're bringing forward of ways to offer small tokens of relief, because we really don't have a longer school day or more time in the world, but we are working on things, and I just wish it could be more, but we will be rolling those things out very shortly. I want to echo the pride. We do need to acknowledge that it is, as Chrissy did, it is still a tremendous amount of work, and we need to make sure that we are acknowledging that effort on behalf of our staff, because it's the only way that this is working right now. It is the only way, is that they're going above and beyond for our kids, and we are very, very appreciative of that.
And thank you, Leisha, for sharing about the 6 through 12 staff. They were in the other breakout room with Leisha. And, the feedback, because I did end up back in the main room with some of the people that were on that call at the end. And just the response from the other district, what they shared with me, how lucky we are. That particular district is on its third change instructionally. And the change that those teachers have had to endure they're now going through their third change. And our teachers, you saw them in the picture, they're smiling, they're smiling just because of their dedication and because their perseverance. I heard our teachers say to this district, we didn't have anyone to help us through this. As far as the model goes, we didn't have another district to look back at and say, how did you do this? Can you give us some advice? Many of these teachers were offering their own services. We'll come to your staff meeting. We'll talk to teachers. We'll do whatever you need to make it easier for them. And that's just another example of their dedication to this profession.
Thank you very much, Chrissy. That was an excellent presentation. A lot of good points, and you really gave people a sense of the frustration, not only of teachers, but students and families, because this is a tough time. Caroline, go ahead.
You're muted, Caroline.
I didn't notice. I just want to echo what Nancy said. That was a wonderful presentation, Chrissy, and it's really heartwarming to see how much you are yourself emotionally invested in the success of these wonderful teachers. So it's quite touching. Got to work on that crying thing a bit, though. Anyway, just kidding. I do have a couple of questions about the facilitators. Now, you had said that K-2, that it's really an essential part of that model for K-2. So does that mean that all K-2 teachers have facilitators?
Currently, it is my understanding that, and I say it like that because if there's one that doesn't, you know, I don't want to be in trouble, but it is my understanding that every K-2 teacher has a facilitator with them.
Okay, and then in the
Now, I will say, you know, there will be instances, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there will be instances where if a facilitator's out or something for that example, you know, they may be left not having a facilitator for a day or a portion of a day.
well, that
In
makes
grades
sense.
3 to 5, there are 2 teachers that are sharing facilitators right now. We're still working on that, but.
You mean every 2 teachers is sharing a facilitator?
No, just 2 actual teachers out of all of the teachers.
There are also some teachers that opted not to.
Right, but of the ones that want a facilitator,
Yes.
there are 2 that we're still working on.
Okay, but are you saying though then that middle school and high school pretty much do not have facilitators?
They do, but not everyone. And in fact, I found that at the high school level, they're actually opting not to have them. In some instances, more so than the other grade levels.
Well, what you said made perfect sense. I mean, at the point that kids are in high school, I think that it's really a lot of the technology issues that are what the facilitators have to address. And most of those kids would be way more sophisticated than probably half their teachers.
Right,
You know,
and one of the other examples that I had was in a high school math class. In fact, I call this one of the low-hanging fruits that I was able to grasp on quickly to. She was sitting at her desk with the students pulled up in front of her. So one of the observations I also made was the need for, in some cases, 2 monitors. And so she had 2 monitors in front of her, not 2 computers, but 2 monitors. And one monitor had all the students in her class. The other monitor had her presentation that she was going over. She had a device in her hand where she was able to sit at her desk, observe the kids remotely and the kids that were in her class. A tablet that she was in, I'm blanking on the name of it, where she was able to write on the tablet and it was displaying on the whiteboard. So she was able to take, you know, something, not have to necessarily type it in. And when I saw that, I had just been in another math classroom at the high school where the teacher was trying to navigate both, and she had a facilitator in the class. So she was relying on her facilitator to monitor the students in one period, but another period she didn't have that facilitator. So I went to the math department chair. I said, what about these tablets? Will this be of assistance? And she said, oh my gosh, Chrissy, yes. And I said, let's talk, let's get them. And I was able to come back, and I really have to stress this, we're very, very thankful for the federal funding that we've received, because we have been able to purchase items in the immediate, time to provide this for our teachers. And so we were able to do this for the math department 7 through 12, provide these tablets for them.
that's wonderful. I would really appreciate it if once you have a chance to make those few changes, you send us that report, because it's great. Anyway, thanks very much.
It's about 7 or 8 pages already, so.
Was it a Jamboard the teacher was using, the Jamboard?
No, I'll look it up, and when it comes to my time for assistant superintendent notes, I'll share it with you, but
Okay, no worries, just trying to help out. Any other comments or questions for Chrissy? Thank you so much, Chrissy, that was awesome, thank you. All right, next is COVID-19 dashboard, Dr. Cabral.
Thanks. So one of the other areas that we're working on is the feedback we're receiving about our dashboard. You know, of course, that we have a dashboard on our website that is updated weekly. Just like the DESE dashboard, we log cases from Thursday of one week to the Wednesday of the next week. So it's 7 days total, and we update it every Wednesday evening. We include 2 data points, which has sort of been confusing for some people, but we feel like it's important to share both. I'll just sort of repeat once again, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education only reports the number of cases of students who are positive that were within a school building in the last 7 days. Now, that doesn't even necessarily mean that they were contagious in the last 7 days. Typically, we are looking at students who are symptomatic. The 2 days prior to the symptom onset date are the 2 days where they're considered contagious. So if somebody was in school 7 or 6 days prior and they're either asymptomatic or had symptoms at the end of the week, they're actually not contagious. But that is that's the metric that the Department of Education is using. What we're finding is that we have had several students, because the spread we're seeing in our district is primarily through organizations in town, like sports activities that students are involved with, or families. That is where we are seeing spread. We have been very fortunate to be able to have data sheets that we're keeping track of for all 6 schools. And we are able to pinpoint in virtually every case where the person has contracted COVID. Not 100%, but 95%. Someone knows that either they have a family member or a sibling, or they were told about a team that they were involved with outside of school, or over the holidays, they were in contact with a family member or a friend, etc. So we keep track of all of that information. That data has also helped us to understand that we still to this day do not have spread in schools, because we are able to identify every close contact of a person who's positive in school and follow that case. Not one of them has developed into a positive COVID. So all close contacts that have been tracked this school year, which have hundreds, none of them have then developed COVID. What we do see, however, is that in families, a parent will get it from work, what have you, then they will keep their children home because the children are considered close contacts. The children will need to be home for 11 days. A week or 10 or even the 11th day into the into their quarantine, they develop symptoms, or they get tested and realize that they are COVID positive. So that is an example of a child that wouldn't have been in school for the prior 7 days. So DESE doesn't report them out. So on our website, we report both numbers. We report the DESE number, which is any student that was in school in the last 7 days, and we report all cases that we are aware of. Of course, it's always possible that a student is out of school and doesn't let us know that they had COVID. They just stay home and isolate themselves. We would never know that, of course, unless they were symptomatic. But since they're home, it doesn't affect our school population. So the data is as close to perfect as it can be, but we all know that no data point is 100% foolproof. So we do provide that information every week. What we realized is that some people were wary of those numbers. They thought because there wasn't other information provided, perhaps we were hiding something, or there might have been a huge blow up at a school and we weren't identifying that. We're obviously not interested in having people be unnecessarily concerned. None of our schools has had a huge outbreak, or even any outbreak, frankly. They are all within normal percentages of one another. We have one school that I would consider an anomaly, and that is in the negative. In other words, the whole school has only had 2 cases to date, 1 student and 1 staff member. The other schools are very much within the range of what you would expect for percentages. Now, We have had difficulty at first even putting together this information, because throughout the Commonwealth, schools have either been able to hire ancillary staff, or they've had their school nurses doing the contact tracing. We have not had that. As we've mentioned before, Chrissy Pruitt and myself have done all of it for the district. And it of course is overwhelming, but we are able to work together in a way that we have not had any cases fall through the cracks that we're aware of. However, Chrissy put together a model of a dashboard that we feel we could reasonably populate. What we don't want is a dashboard that we can't fill in every week. And so we went to the union with this. We asked them for their input. Is there anything else that they think would be useful information? Is it unnecessarily cumbersome? Are the definitions clear? And so we've already vetted it with them, and now we're bringing it forward to you for your consideration. If you feel comfortable having us post this information weekly, we can put it on our website. This is not, I don't think anyone is it's going to validate that we do not have massive outbreaks anywhere. You see increased numbers in schools that frankly just have a larger population of kids. One thing that I maybe don't love about it, but maybe there are other ways we can communicate it, is that it is done weekly, because you'll see it's a lot of information on the page. And so to have it all on one streaming page would be rather overwhelming. So we're doing it on a week. There are tabs at the bottom that show week by week what the information is. What it doesn't do is easily show you longitudinally when you have an increased number of cases in schools. I think that's important because, and I sent this out, I highlighted this on our weekly chart to show the community that what we have seen is right after vacations, we have had a huge uptick, hundreds of % increase in the number of cases. And it was true after Thanksgiving break. It's true after winter break. After Thanksgiving break, there were 4 weeks of increase because, again, students would be positive or parents would be positive. They would pass it on to someone in the family, then they would be positive, then another sibling would get it and they would be positive. And so it stretched that out for approximately 4 weeks until it started to reduce again. And now we're in the 4th week after winter vacation, and we still had this week, I posted it yesterday, we had 20 cases this week, which is a lot for us. And again, it's the 4th week after vacation. So it's hard to say just yet, is that because of the second surge regionally? Is it because of the vacation period like we saw after Thanksgiving? We won't know that for another week or two, because if it is only because of vacation, then we should see it slowly go down in the next 2 weeks. So there are things that really we just need time to tell us as we look at the data. We cannot make presumptions on trends unless we actually see a trend. So with that said, I would like to show you the dashboard. We shared it with the cabinet already. Chrissy is going to display it. I'm just going to go through and show what information is on there and how people can read that. Again, if you see down the bottom of the dashboard, you can see that there are tabs for each week. We have 3 on there now. What we'll do is we'll have a tab that has the cases from September on the way we have been collecting it. We'll have that on there so people can go back and take a look at that if they would like, but we're not going to go back and do this way for the whole school year. We don't have the time to do that, frankly. And honestly, it's these last few weeks that have been the most cases. So these are going to be the most informative data points anyway. But as you can see, the first column lists the name of the school. We have all 6 schools listed. We give you the total number of students because it's obviously important in order to calculate percentages of infection. If people are interested in doing that, you need the total population in the school. This 3rd column says total positive cases. That does not mean currently. So this will not be something that is a a total for current cases. We don't currently have 130 students positive in the district. That means since September 1st, since we started school, there have been a total of 130 cases, not currently. Then total positive cases of staff, we have had 30. Total DESE positive cases, again, that is DESE reporting students who were in school in the prior 7 days, and then DESE positive cases for staff. Weekly positive cases, this is where people, these last 4 columns is where people will get the weekly cases for the tab that they're clicking on. So how many cases did we have in Easton of students? As I said, we had 20 this week. 16 of them you can see were students, 4 of them were staff. And then, excuse me, you can see the breakdown by school, and then you will see what DESE should have reported on their website. And I did check that, and that is what they have. 5 students were in school in the last 7 days that were positive. 4 staff members were in school in the last 7 days that were positive for this week. Now, each week, the last 4 columns will, of course, be updated for the week. The first 5 columns will, from total positive cases of students to total DESE positive cases of staff, those will be, the totals will be added to that each week. So for example, total student cases was 130 from September. Next week, if there are 10 student cases, that will say 140. Does anyone have any questions or suggestions or recommendations about this dashboard? At the bottom, you can see we just have the definitions of basically everything that I just explained. And then the September 2020 to January 6th data can be found by clicking there. That's the blue chart that we have on our website right now. We'll put that there, so if people want to take a look at that, they can just go back right to the beginning of the school year.
So Alicia, has a person been hired? I know you talked about this at the last meeting. Have you hired someone to help out with all this?
We haven't. We have tried. We are having trouble. We would like to get somebody with some medical background. We're having a significant challenge right now getting substitute nurses. We have some nurses who are out of school right now. We're having trouble filling their roles. We're looking for RNs, LPNs. If anybody's interested, we are actively searching for people to work on contact tracing, but also to be substitutes in our buildings. So we don't have anyone yet, but we continue to work with the Board of Health. We're meeting with them daily and working just explicitly with their guidance. And of course, the school nurses as well. We have those 6 spreadsheets that we are used to be in constant communication with the nurses every day.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone else has, there we are. Does anyone else have a question for Dr. Cabral? Go ahead, Jackie.
I was just going to say, I like the way you laid it out. I think it's pretty easy to read once you understand what each column means. And I think it's going to be very useful for parents and staff to be able to follow this. So thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, well, thank you. I think that's what a lot of people have been looking for. Something that they can look at and say, okay, this is where Easton is at.
Yeah.
Good job.
We did a lot of research. We contacted many other districts. Every other district we contacted, none of them had their administrators doing it. So they said, just have so-and-so do it, or just have this person do it, or you can just, these people collected and these people posted. And we're like, well, we think we finally figured out a way that we're able to do it because we want it to be accurate. We don't want to make any mistakes, but we certainly put a sense of urgency on it because I think in the absence of it, people were making leaps that just are not there. And so let's just make sure everybody understands we're not hiding anything. We just simply don't have the manpower, but we're doing the best we can, and it should be on there in this format every week.
Right, thank you. Next is budget process update. Dr. Cabral.
Okay, so we are obviously behind in our budgeting. So is the state. They still don't have their figures out. And so I just wanted to, while we don't have actual figures to share with you or any projections for next year, we are actively working on our budget, and I just wanted to let you know where we were in the process. Lynn, if you can let Marilyn Gordon in case she wants to add to any of this, she's in attendance. So right now what we're doing, if you remember last year, last year was the second year that we utilized a process with our entire staff so that all of the staff could participate in collecting information about what should be in the budget and what we should really be working toward as a district. It started slow. People were not familiar with doing this. People had to learn about the budgeting process for the school district, which is like any other budget in the universe. Our school budgets, they're very unique in how their funds are allocated and the multiple funding sources and what it can be used for, et cetera. But they were very engaged and extremely helpful. And so last year was a little bit better than the year before, and we're hoping, despite the challenges of working mostly remotely on this, we are hoping that this year will be even better. So we met with the cabinet. We provided them with all of the documentation from last year. We're still utilizing the same system of strategic, proactive, and reactive needs categories based on what we feel very strongly is, in our professional judgment, what this district needs most for the students at this time. We have, the principals are working until February 8th. They will be presenting to the rest of the cabinet what their first pass or their first draft is of their school-specific reactive, proactive, and strategic needs are. We will then work together at that point as a cabinet to determine what we need as a district. Are there resources they can share? Are there other funding sources we can utilize? And then ultimately, how do we rank this? How do we prioritize our needs in those three categories for the entire district? At that point, we should hopefully have a better idea of the comings and goings of funding sources. They're trickling in now. A couple of things I can tell you, for example, is the Chapter 70 funding. We received minimum aid again. And so this year there is an increase of $101,190. It's not a tremendous amount for the number of students that we have, but we, of course, will make good use of it. On the negative, we did find out that our Title I funding is going to be decreased by $50,000. We also are aware that the ESSER or federal stimulus, what they called ESSER 1, which really helped us to buy a great many of the technology devices and programs that Chrissy talked about in her presentation, that they're coming out with ESSER 2. So we should be finding out when we will be receiving that money shortly, and we can determine what that can be used for. That's about all we have right now in terms of our entitlement grants and other information about incoming funds. So generally speaking, we're still at minimum aid. We're not going to benefit from the SOA or the Student Opportunity Act. Freud would be cracking up right now. We do not benefit from that at all. So there's not going to be a huge change there, but we will obviously keep you posted as more information comes in. So we have, at this point, we have the schools working on their presentations. They will present to us as a cabinet on the 8th. As I said, we will work together to try to prioritize those needs as a district, send that back out to staff for their review, such as we did last year. Then we'll take what we determine are going to be percentage increased needs in each of those categories, align that with what is available to us at the town and state levels, and that's when, of course, the real challenge begins. It usually involves us having to make cuts, make changes, make some combine things, and get as creative as possible. But that's where we'll be heading in the next month or two. We did receive the House 1 budget numbers, and that's where I'm giving you the information about minimum aid and so forth, and the SOA. That is now going to be, obviously, the House and Senate are going to continue working on that, and the Ways and Means Committee, and finally a budget will come out. As is typical, we will probably vote on the budget before we actually get a final state budget. That's always been the case, but certainly that has been exacerbated by the pandemic. And we will obviously keep you updated as we have more numbers and figures. Unfortunately, that's about all that we have right now, but we will certainly keep you posted. We're extremely excited about stimulus money. You can see how that's been very helpful to us to this point. The one thing to remember, though, and I hate to be negative about money that's coming at us, and I certainly don't mean to be, but the problem is that these funds are what we call one-time funds. They're great for things like buying technology or purchasing programs, but programs usually have licenses that you need to pay for every year. So you buy them for a year with stimulus money, and then now you don't have it the following year. Or you buy technology, but you can't maintain it, or you don't have a plan to replace it when it expires. So one-time funds can be very tricky. We have to be very careful about where we invest it, because you get programs that get going and they're reliant on something, and then 2-3 years later they're gone because we can't maintain it. So, and you certainly cannot usually pay people with it. We are able to pay for interns and substitutes, because when their time is completed, we don't have to pay them unemployment benefits. We're self-insured as a municipality, so if we hire people with it and it's a one-time fund, it expires at the end of this fiscal year or next fiscal year, then we have to let them go. And then for an additional 40 weeks, we have to pay them unemployment. So we actually put ourselves on a fiscal cliff for that following year. So there are several challenges, and obviously our number one need is our people. When we talk about social emotional needs, we're talking about mental health counselors. When we're talking about just the pandemic, we're talking about nurses. When we're talking about facilities, we're talking about custodians. When we're talking about class sizes, we're talking about teachers. So those are our greatest needs. So I just want to make sure that people understand, while stimulus money may be coming, and it may be hundreds of thousands of dollars, we then have to determine, how do we responsibly spend those funds in a way that we can maintain after the stimulus money is gone, and how can we free things up and creatively have assistance for our staff, which they need in the form of people, facilitators, and all the other positions you've heard us talk about. So I don't want to temper the joy of hearing that we may be getting money, but it is very important to keep that in mind. Our problems are not miraculously solved as a result of stimulus money, and we just have to be aware of that. Are there any questions about that process or any of the other items that I discussed?
Go ahead, Jen.
In terms of being able to hire staff, are there any agencies that are available where that way you're not hiring somebody, you're doing it through an agency there? I know we do it like for Whitson's, right? So our food services is done that way. Are there any agencies out there for some of these other needs that have to be filled that we can look at and that have any options for us?
Yes, that's a great question. There are a couple of considerations with that. One is that you typically find that with our special services providers and nurses. So for example, we were making frantic phone calls today to an agency for substitute nurses. Because we're having such a difficult problem, as I said, hiring them. The two issues with that. One is that they're exorbitantly priced. So you can typically get one for the, you can get one for the price of two. And so we have to be careful about that, but it does get rid of the problem, about having to ultimately terminate staff or pay for unemployment. The other issue is that, for fair labor practice, you do have to make sure that you are not taking away union work with an agency. So we have to be careful that we don't violate any bargaining contracts in that way. For the school nurses, for example, it's obvious that this is temporary, that this pandemic isn't going to be here forever. And so we wouldn't want to hire, 5 more nurses because we won't have a need for them, or we'll have other needs that are certainly more critical in post-pandemic times. But yes, we have made use of them. We have done that for things that tend to change rather quickly. For example, if we need psychological testing services, you never know when you might have a peak in that, and that's just sort of a one-time thing. And so sometimes we'll contract out for that. Nurses, as I said, BCBAs, behaviorists, those kinds of things. But so there's that, but in terms of the cost and in terms of bargaining agreements, we have to be careful about how we hire, but that is a great question. And yes, we do make use of them. I thought I was going to make another point, but I've lost it. But yeah, good question.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then my other question was, we got a note from Claire Cronin today about the DESE grant. That's for this fiscal year, not next fiscal year. Is that right? Or do we not know? Or
yeah, we do know. So that is, that has to be, yes. So the Department of Education has decided not to do that as a grant. That's just really vernacular. We're getting the money. What they're doing is they're actually doing it as an additional aid package. So they're going to take that money. It was $143,000, I believe.
$130,000.
$130,000. Yes, $130,000 that
out of 53 million.
I'm sorry?
Out of 53 million, Easton got 130,000.
Yes, the state received $53 million in federal monies to help districts get through the rest of the school year. And there was a formula used based on need for low income. And Easton is going to receive $130,000 in 2 payments, one in February, one in April. Again, that's one-time funds. We will definitely put it to good use. We can't hire staff with that. We haven't gotten all of the paperwork on it yet, but what we've gotten so far, any additional aid funds or grants always come with very specific uses for it and what's allowable, and you have to report on that very specifically. So far with this, it allows for purchase of PPE, it allows for cleaning. We could potentially again hire more subs to help us with, that's what I was going to say before, is that even the agencies, we're having trouble with nurse subs, the agencies are having the same issue. So, the agencies sometimes don't even have the staff. It's not a sure thing. So it's very specific to things that are are 100% connected to the pandemic. So, yes, I don't know when we'll be getting that exactly in February, but we've been told that it will be split between a February payment and an April payment, which will get us through the school year in terms of protective equipment, masks for students, gowns for nurses, so forth. Thank you. We got that today, so I didn't think of it or have it on my prepared list. So thank you for reminding me about that.
Are there any other questions about the budget? All right, thank you, Dr. Cabral. Next is district update, Dr. Cabral.
So I thought what I would do today, unless you have any questions, otherwise, of course, we have gotten, or we continue to get a lot of questions about when we're going to open our schools, when we'll have students back full time. Of course, that is our goal. That is our ultimate goal. We are well aware of the research. Frankly, we don't need to do research. We're with the kiddos every day and we know what good practice is. So I very much appreciate people sending us research, but just know you don't have to. It's not necessary. We are well aware of it. Continue if you'd like, but we are well aware and we are moving to that as fast as we can. People have asked if we have a plan. We do have a plan. It's actually the same plan we've had since before we started school. We are ready to move back into schools. However, it is really contingent upon being able to reduce our social distancing. We are at physical capacity right now. In other words, we cannot fit more students into the rooms where they are learning unless we are at 5 or 4, or in some cases even 3 feet of social distancing. We are aware that the government at the state and federal level have been encouraging schools to open and have students come back. Again, I just want to remind people that if you think across the country and across the entire state, over 300 communities, there are many, many different iterations of how schools are operating. They're referring to people who are still fully remote, which there are several districts that are still fully remote. They're also referring to people that have less live teaching time than we do. So they're not necessarily pointing to Easton. They're not saying Easton is not meeting the requirements for student need. So it is something that's important to keep in mind. However, the CDC definition of a close contact is 6 feet for more than 15 minutes. Now, obviously, our students and our staff are together for more than 15 minutes. The only way we can assure that they are not identified as a close contact is keeping them 6 feet apart. And so we do try to maintain that everywhere we possibly can. When students are traveling in the hallways and so forth, they're obviously could be less than 6 feet in some cases, but not for more than 15 minutes with the same person. So that is a really essential part of the plan that we have in place to keep all students and staff safe. A close contact per the CDC has to be put in quarantine and be tested. We can't have clusters of students regularly out of school, quarantined and tested. And certainly if you have to be quarantined and tested, there is a risk there. We have not had spread in our schools. And to Caroline's point earlier about another topic that we discussed about athletics, we don't feel at this time that we should look at something that's successful and say, because it's successful, we need to make it more lax. On the contrary, we feel it's successful because of the way it's set up. In addition to that, you just need to look at our district website to see that we have had the surge I was talking about earlier, post-vacation period. And perhaps as a result of the second surge in the Commonwealth that we've been seeing. It is not the time to bring more bodies into the building. We have worked very hard. We've talked to our legislature. We've talked to our superintendent groups. We've requested more information about vaccinations for our staff. We're really looking to do everything we can to get our students back in the building as soon as possible. I understand that people continue to compare us to other districts. Once again, I would like to caution people against doing that. Every district is different. We have different funding. We have different level of staffing. We have different physical buildings. And so it's comparing apples to potatoes. It's not even apples to oranges. And it's very important to keep that in mind. I will say earlier in this meeting, we talked about the fact that many districts are using Easton as a model right now. These are people who are aware. I am very well aware. I talk to my superintendent colleagues weekly, and I talk to many of them daily. I am very aware of what other districts are doing before anyone else is aware of what those districts are doing, sometimes even their own staff, because we talk about our plans regularly. I'll just give a couple of examples. People have been sending me correspondence asking why we can't go to half-day sessions like some other schools are doing. We do not believe that is better than what we're doing right now. Some districts who go half-day, their half-day is 2 hours, or it's 2.5 hours. Our day is not a half day. Our day, again, and sometimes we erroneously refer to it as a half day just out of ease. Our students are going home 2 hours early. We have 2/3 days on the 2 days that they're in school. In addition to that, when they're not in school, they have live instruction on the computer from our staff. All of the half-day superintendents that I've spoken to, the students are in school for 2 hours in the morning, and then the entire rest of the day, they work independently, either on a computer without a teacher or on pre-packaged packets of information. We do not find that to be a better model. I'm not disparaging my colleagues. For whatever reason, that may work better in their district. It might work better for their students. It does not work for our students. If you remember, we recently had new guidelines put out by DESE that were put out well after our plans were established and implemented. We passed that structured learning time, or SLT, with flying colors. We're well above the minimum mandated hours for that live interaction time. We have colleagues scrambling, like the district we met with just this week, who are looking to add 10 hours a week, 5 hours a week, 8 hours a week to their instruction with students. These are districts that families are sending me as exemplars because there's not a full understanding of the quality of the time that goes behind when students are working with a staff member and when they aren't. So I know there's no way people would know that, and I understand that and I respect that. But I just want to get that information out to try to help explain why we aren't moving to some of those models. Some of those half-day districts have reached out to me to say, can you help us figure out how to do they're calling it live streaming, but for us it's the remote learning, live remote learning, contact time that we have with our students. And like Chrissy said earlier, teachers are having to redo their entire delivery of education now because that's not how they started the school year. So again, I understand that it is tempting to compare us to other districts, but I assure you, every district that you are sending to us to take a look at, I've already spoken to those superintendents. I already understand why it might work for them, but it doesn't work for us. In some cases, I feel that ours is far better for our students than what they have. And when I say obviously, please understand this is with the input of all of our professional staff on what it is we're offering and what is best for our kids in terms of contact with teachers and staff members and special service providers. And I think other than any other examples that people have given, I think, you know, we do have, for example, a somewhat close district that is at 3 and 4 feet social distancing, and that superintendent begrudgingly went to that only because the schools they have are so small that they wouldn't be able to have any students back without it. The vast majority are still at 6 feet and are maintaining that whenever humanly possible. We are able to, and so we are continuing. I will say that some of those schools that are at those distances have gone fully remote for several weeks already. And can I say 100% that it's because they were forced to change their distancing? No, but I also can't say that's not the reason. And so, you know, our number one commitment was and remains the safety of every staff member and every student. Physical and social emotional safety. We're well aware of the research. We're well aware of all of the data points and the medical input and the CDC and our local Department of Education. And we take all of that into consideration when making these decisions. People have asked me to commit one way or the other if we're going to move into or out of our current model. I can't do that. In fact, we could move within one day if our numbers warranted it, but we would likely give the district 1 to 2 weeks notice because we do have people that have to make childcare arrangements for their children and so forth. And so that's the only thing that would make that maybe a couple of week process. But our plan could be enacted within a day. The last thing I just wanted to point out, several people have also asked us to consider, which we have, of course had considered from the beginning of school, just extending the day by that extra 2 hours. That is not possible with our model. Schools that have done that do not have live instruction of students into the classroom. They're able to do that. Like Chrissy mentioned in her presentation, it is critical for PK to 2 to have those facilitators. We cannot take them away from our teachers who are doing the live streaming. We would have to stop that model in order to add the 2 hours. Now, believe me, I understand it's tempting to think that it's a simple fix. And it's tempting to think, what's the difference? It's just 2 hours. Just let them eat lunch in school and stay there. There are mitigating factors that most people don't know about. I don't ask people to follow along blindly and just trust us without asking questions by any means. I just want to keep reinforcing what some of those reasons are. If people are looking for more detail, school committee, if you're looking for more detail on anything specifically, we're happy to provide it. But I must assure people there are very, very many and very specific reasons. Transportation is another example of simply adding 2 hours. It is not, if it's simple, we would have done it. If it's simple, it would have been done. So we appreciate the continued questions. We understand that it can be confusing. We will continue to push out information and repeat this information for you. Please send us your questions if you still have concerns. But overall, the message I really want to convey tonight is please don't think we've overlooked the most obvious. Please don't think we aren't trying to work to our students getting back into the building. And please don't think we've stopped in this effort. It is a conversation we continue to have daily. We've solicited the input from our staff members, our cabinet, our parents. We're looking for as much feedback as we can get. And probably the most helpful is my constant communication with other districts. Okay, looking at other models, looking at what's working for them and what's not working for them. And we will continue to do that throughout the remainder of this situation, which we hope will be over in the next couple of months.
Jackie?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Cabral. I just had a couple of questions. So I know you talked about the need for facilitators in the younger grades, and I actually, in watching another district school committee meetings a while back, was pretty surprised that in the earlier grades, they were, for the kids that weren't in on the days the kids weren't in, they just had packets of information, you know, kindergartners, first grade, second graders. They weren't having any live instruction on the days that they were home. That actually was very surprising to me. But you had also mentioned tonight that a lot of the upper grades don't have facilitators. And so I thought maybe you could review why, since even though they don't have facilitators, why it wouldn't be possible to go back to full days for those grades.
Sure, thank you. So that has to do with scheduling, transportation, lunch, and I'm probably not remembering everything, but just to give you those three as an example to begin. The middle school and the high school, generally, we need to be doing the same thing with those two schools. The primary reason being transportation. They're on the same run, and that run directly impacts our other two runs, which is for Richardson, Olmsted, and pre-K and 2. So changing the time of those runs actually has a domino effect for our other. We use the same 17 buses for all three runs. So that gets very complex very quickly. The other thing, so I say that first because if there's a challenge on the middle school side that the high school doesn't have, it still impacts the high school. because one can't go without the other. If there's a challenge that the high school has that doesn't impact the middle school, same thing. They have to sort of move together. And we're not even convinced, we haven't even completed our analysis of if the middle and high school move to full days, if our buses will be able to have the turnaround in order to transport the other two groups of students. The lunch, the middle school in particular does not have the space to have students be able to eat lunch without the masks and be sufficiently separated. We don't want them to just have the 6-foot distancing. We want them to be even further than that. If we bring students back or if we have the longer day, the classrooms have more students in them than the elementary classrooms right now in the cohorts. So they're very, very maxed out. It's very difficult to add students at this point. And so having lunches even with the same number of students in the classroom would not be possible. And we don't have enough space in the common areas, which some of them are being used for classes because the classrooms weren't large enough to fit the number of students at 6-foot distancing. We would not be able to have lunch. So lunch is a challenge. And then the schedules. In order to make these schedules work, and when I say these schedules, I mean having the students leave when they do, we had to actually change the schedules. In order to move the schedules back, we would have to move staff around. And so at the middle school, and both at the high school, there are classes that really need the facilitators. Those facilitators are people that normally would have, now I'm getting into scheduling, but they would have their prep periods at all different times of the day. We can't have people having prep periods while classes are in session because we need all hands on deck. We need those extra staff members to be the facilitators. We don't have staff that we hired to be facilitators. So for example, if Chrissy's teaching an English class and I'm a math teacher, on my prep period, I can't have my contractual preparation time because I need to be the facilitator for Chrissy's class during the school day. So the reason we had to change the schedule around is because all teachers, or 95% of staff, have their preparatory period at the same time. That's what allows us to have all hands on deck for facilitation, for hall duty was something Chrissy also talked about, for making sure that people are spaced appropriately in the hallways during traveling periods or during intake and exit. These are all things that are different that don't typically happen in your average school year. And so we need these extra people. So one of the biggest ways we're able to do that is giving everyone their preparatory period at the same time. That's when students have their transition period in the middle of the day. And then when they have a little bit of independent work in the afternoon. That gives the teachers their prep period. If we put all the teachers' prep periods back and spaced them out over a school day, we wouldn't be able to have all this extra staff, which is what's keeping kids safe right now in the building. So I know it probably sounds convoluted and complicated, but especially if you don't understand scheduling at the secondary level, but that's the way we typically schedule people, and there's no other way that we could do it and still have the live interaction of students who aren't in school, which, by the way, has proven to be extremely beneficial. And it's sort of an ancillary benefit that we hadn't anticipated, which we think is also contributing to keeping our students safe. Because if a student has to go on quarantine for 2 weeks, they don't have to be out of school for 2 weeks. They can still engage in their regular classroom. That is a huge benefit to students. And we found that it also helps keep people more honest about keeping their students out, or it isn't so scary for them to keep their student out for 2 weeks because they know they're not going to fall that far behind. So we have been very fortunate that our parents have been overly cautious. If a student has symptoms, they keep them home. If they're a close contact, they keep them home because they know they can engage in the classroom and they won't have a packet of work for 2 weeks and fall really far behind, especially at the high school. And we believe that's also been able to keep our students safe. So I don't know if that's too much information or not enough information, but you know, I can add to it if you'd like, but there's just so many reasons that they're all connected to one another, and we're working on all of them. We're not throwing up our hands and saying it's just not going to work. Please understand that isn't the case. I'm just explaining some of the challenges and some of the things we're working through. We continue to work through them and look for different ways of trying to solve them.
Any other questions? Thank you. All right, thanks, Dr. Cabral. Next is public comment. Chrissy, do we have anything?
There is nothing in the Q&A box at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. Superintendent notes.
I do have two pieces of information. I think Chrissy's going to cover some other things, but if she doesn't, you know, I will interrupt and add them later. So one is I wanted to acknowledge Marilyn Gordon. She applied for, I'm just trying to see if she's still here. She applied for a loan. Marilyn, you're welcome to join us if you'd like. She applied for a loan for our food service program, a grant for our food service program, and we were awarded that grant this week. So Gen Youth, New England Dairy and Food Council, in partnership with Albertsons Companies Foundation and Shaw's Supermarkets, has given us a COVID-19 emergency school meal delivery fund grant award of $10,000 for our food service program. So we have been continuing to provide grab-and-go meals for students and families to come and pick up. We have had a lot of food insecurity, yes, even in Easton during this challenging time, and we've been able to make sure that we can provide the food that they need, and this is in no small part to this contribution. So we are extremely thankful for this donation through Shaw's Supermarket of the grant from Shaw's Supermarket for $10,000, but also for Marilyn for her efforts in securing that grant for the district. So that is great positive news on that. The other issue is today marks the deadline of applying for pooled testing in the district. We did talk about that at great length. I won't go over every item that we talked about, the pros and cons that we discussed. Certainly people can review the last meeting for that, or I can revisit some if you'd like, but it was my understanding that there were significant concerns that mirrored the concerns of the cabinet with that pooled testing. I would say paramount of which is that while the testing kits are free, the staffing is not. The implementation is the responsibility of the district. There are duties that run the gamut from collecting the samples from everyone in the district to packaging them, shipping them, securing all of the releases, parent releases and staff releases that need to take place for 4,000 people, and keeping track of that once we get the information back. I just wanted to make sure that we were hearing you correctly, and that was the take of the school committee. I understand that it's extremely tempting to say, let's get tests. If we can get tests, let's just do them and get them. But the implementation is extremely, extremely tricky. And a lot of districts are not taking part of it for that reason, unfortunately. We seem to have a very good system in place where as soon as someone is symptomatic, we're sending them out for testing right away. And the asymptomatic students don't seem to be spreading in school. We have no evidence of that whatsoever. So for the cost and the effort involved, we were not able to identify the significant benefit for the district at this time. But of course, it's something we still continue to look at if it in any way develops in, any differently for us. I don't know if there were any questions about that.
Not about pool testing, but we did receive the letter that you and other superintendents and union presidents are sending to Governor Baker. And that's still in you're still in top of that momentum wise?
We are, yes. Again, that's the result of the Baker administration and the Department of Education insisting that students are back in school. We're just trying to help them understand that there are some significant impediments to that, the least of which is faculty concern about their safety that we support. It's a lot easier to keep the students separated from one another at their desks, for example, or at markings in the hallway, than it is to keep staff away from students, especially our youngest learners. You know, we're still having to tie shoes and wipe tears and provide comfort. And it's not always easy for them to be separated. So you can imagine that there is significant concern there. So we are just saying that if, something has to match up, we either have a better understanding of what that means and support what we're currently doing in the majority of the districts, or move the educators forward and vaccinate them sooner so that we can get our kids back in school. We're willing to work with whatever that is, but the two do not match up just yet. The guidance we're receiving and the support we're receiving don't match up. And so we're just urging them to consider one or the other.
Thank you. Do you have more to add to your superintendent notes?
Those are my 2 items for now.
Okay. All right, thank you. Chrissy, assistant superintendent notes.
Sure. So the DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, has identified 2 separate student learning time goals that each district is supposed to meet at a minimum. The first goal is what the commissioner came out with and altered at the beginning of the year. That is our time on learning. Previously at the elementary level, it was 900 hours for the school year. It was now adapted to 850 hours. And for secondary, it was 990 hours. And it was adapted to 935 hours because of the minus 10 days from the 180 school days to 170 school days for this school year. The other number is the minimum requirement for what they call live teaching. And that requirement, that's where the students are actually face-to-face with a teacher. And that requirement is a minimum of face-to-face, whether it's online or in person. A minimum requirement of 35 hours over 10 days. We supersede that particular goal, which is what we've been talking about recently within the past few weeks. As far as the initial time on learning goal of 935 hours, it was brought to our attention this week that we are missing 30 minutes we are short by 30 minutes at the high school per week. So with that being said, we are almost at the halfway mark of the school year. We are going to be instituting a slight change in schedule. Mr. Paul will be notifying families and students and staff of this tomorrow. The change in schedule is that instead of having 5 minutes between 5-minute transition time on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, they will now have 4 minutes.
Like a passing period.
Passing period, right. And there will be no transition times on Wednesdays. Since we are fully remote, we don't need that passing period time. That's another change. And also the transition home will change from 60 minutes to 55 minutes. That will actually give us a total of 65 extra minutes for time on learning per week. When we were alerted to the fact that we were missing 30 minutes per week, we'd still have to make up the missing minutes from the prior weeks. So that's why we were setting the goal of 60 minutes, for the remainder of the year. We will be superseding that goal by 5 minutes per week, which will put us right on par for making sure that we are meeting the required time on learning hours.
I just want to point out that The passing periods last year at OA were 4 minutes.
Correct.
Not 5 minutes. This year, there was the extra minute added. We weren't really sure if people would need more time to pass, if they needed to log in and out of classes and so forth. Mr. Paul feels that going back to the 4 minutes, now that we've experienced, is going to be fine. So just quick summation, the changes are 5 minutes less for the period of time that's called a transition, where students travel home and have their lunch, which is an hour. We'll go 5 minutes less to 55 minutes. One less minute between passing periods, and no passing periods on Wednesdays when they're just going from one class to another. So it does represent a quote unquote schedule change, but we do not anticipate that it is going to be any significant hardship for anyone. And it still helps us accomplish our goal.
Right. And I also want to reiterate that our students have actually reached out to Mr. Paul at the high school requesting additional time during the school day to complete their work, because there has been an abundance of work in some instances. By reducing the number of minutes from 60 minutes to 55 minutes, that does give our students a little bit more time to complete some of their work during the school day. Even though it is 5 minutes, we still feel that, you know, cumulative time throughout the week, that's an additional 20 minutes for the week. Any questions about that?
Nope.
Nope. Okay. And then I also just wanted to share with you the success of our Professional Development Day. We were very fortunate to have our Professional Development Day focused on diversity and inclusion. We had 2 addresses, one from Raising Multicultural Kids, facilitated by Kelly Lamb, which was a presentation called Walk in My Shoes, where we had a panel of presenters, 2 former students and a parent, actually speak with our staff about their experiences living in Easton, being a person of color. It was extremely powerful, and the feedback has been wonderful. Our staff definitely want more opportunities, and we are in the process of working with RMK, Raising Multicultural Kids, to provide more of those opportunities for our staff. The other presentation was by our Massachusetts Safe Schools organization through the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. Jeff Parati is the point person in that department, and they focused on supporting LGBTQ+ students in our community. Again, the feedback was great. We know that we need to address and have more open dialogue around these issues, and we are heading in that direction. I will also just let you know that in the afternoon, like I had shared before, we had time for educators to plan and also participate in the newly designed Ed Camp model at the secondary level, where teachers list a common topic that they'd like to discuss, and teachers just actually join that session to have conversation about a particular topic and provide professional development for each other. So it was a very successful day, and it's too bad we don't have more of them. And that's all I have for you this evening, unless I forgot something, Dr. Cabral.
Thank you. Okay, school committee notes, Caroline?
I probably should have brought this up when Dr. Cabral was talking about the various COVID issues, but I was wondering, now that we know there are several new variants of the coronavirus coming to us, in fact, we're quite sure that the UK variant is already in Massachusetts. The Brazilian variant and the South African variant are almost certainly going to come at some point. I'm wondering if we are taking into account the new variants in terms of just perhaps re-examining some of our contact tracing protocols, how we identify close contacts, because, for example, the UK variant, the assumption is that far fewer than 15 minutes of close contact would be required. to be infected with the virus from someone with the UK variant, which is already something like 70% of the UK. It moves very rapidly. So my thought is that particularly in classrooms at the early elementary level, where teachers and children presumably are taking off their masks to eat or for snacks, certainly for children, that if there is a positive case, I'm wondering if it would make sense to look at a larger group as close contacts as opposed to just those within 6 feet of the person who's identified as being COVID positive. I'm just asking that maybe we kind of keep in mind that the infectiousness of the virus is likely to increase once these variants really take hold. And given what's happening in other countries, that's unfortunately quite likely to happen. I think this would mostly apply to situations where children are taking their masks off within the classroom. I know that there are many at RO, for example, I believe the children still go outside for their mask breaks. So that would, of course, not be necessary in that case. So I just wanted to mention that as something that I thought perhaps we should be taking a look at.
Yeah, we are. So every all the decisions that we make are literally updated daily at the guidance of the Board of Health. And so, yes, we are taking all of that into account. We're sharing all of our statistics and numbers and data and findings with the Board of Health, and they're all made accordingly with their guidance.
And I know that one of your mottos is, that we aim for the ceiling, not the floor. So I know that we do still depend on the CDC, but just, based on the last 8-9 months, the CDC is not necessarily on the forefront in terms of kind of disseminating new information. I think that they're all busily studying everything, and certainly they have many highly qualified scientists looking at all of these things. But I think that we don't necessarily get that information as quickly as it becomes available to the CDC. So I know that we rely on them a great deal, but sometimes I think we can almost be more proactive than the CDC would have us.
Sure.
Based on their own guidance.
We actually use multiple sources. I reference the CDC regularly when we talk about social distancing because they currently do have the 6 foot where the WHO the World Health Organization says 3 to 6, and the Department of Elementary Education says 3 to 6. So that's why I reference them often with the CDC, because we do want to go with the highest level of safety for our kids, for sure. But we take into consideration multiple data sources, again, with the Board of Health and Mass DPH as well.
Are we having children still go outside for lunch most of
Whenever
the time?
the weather allows, they're outside for everything. Phys ed, lunch, classes, music, whatever, whenever the weather allows.
When you were addressing the fact that we, have a somewhat reduced schedule in person for really all levels, but to me, one of the major reasons to keep it that way at RO and obviously the high school and middle school is because it would be very difficult to add a couple of hours and then say no lunch for whatever age group.
No, we can't.
But I think that to have kids,
lunch if we added time.
Right.
Question, yeah.
And that would, to me, greatly increase the risk for both staff and students if we were to start having kids that age have their masks off for half an hour for lunch. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Joe?
Mine's just a little shout out on a happy note to Mr. Benson and the newest EPS Tiger, Alexis Victoria. So congratulations to him and his wife. That's it.
Thank you. Jackie?
I don't have anything tonight. Thank you.
Jen?
Just maybe 3 things. So the first is kind of tagging on to what the professional development opportunity. Raising Multicultural Kids runs a book club, and last Monday had a session using, instead of a book, some videos from Emmanuel Acho, who is the author of a now book that started off the series called Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. It's extremely engaging, a really a great conversation starter and a way to prompt some good discussion. So I was able to attend Monday's event, and I was really happy to see quite a few Easton Public School staff were there as well. So I would encourage anybody who's watching this to check out Raising Multicultural Kids site or Facebook page. There's a second session for this that'll be on Monday, February 8th, and it's just very engaging and enlightening. Second is I know there's been a lot of media attention on a new report from, is my audio okay?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just getting feedback on my side, okay. So the American Academy of Pediatrics, their pediatrics journal this week had published a case study on secondary transmission of COVID in schools. And there's some headlines that are interesting, and I would just encourage anybody who reads it to read the whole report, because there are some key pieces of information that are missing from some of the reporting on it, which is, namely that the schools in the study that had in-person learning were using the same protocols that we have here in Easton, which are 6-foot distancing, mask wearing, hand washing, et cetera. So it's consistent with what we're finding here in our own experience with, no evidence of spread in school thus far, but having that distancing on top of other mitigation measures, and ventilation as well. It just confirms the experience that we have. So it's not that it's not spreading at all under any circumstances. That it's not spreading under specific circumstances, which are the circumstances that we are choosing right now for our model. So just thought that was important to point out. And then finally, so much appreciation to Bill Matthews, the athletic department, all the coaches. Winter sports has been a struggle with quarantines, and I have a little bit of a view into it as a parent for one athlete for one sport, and to know that that's being multiplied all the time by many teams with constantly changing incidences coming up that are requiring quarantine and then rescheduling and dealing with facilities, and every facility has their own rules about when athletes are allowed back, and different schools are handling, the teams we're competing against have different rules. It's really a logistical nightmare. And I just appreciate, all of the work that the athletic department in its entirety, plus all their coaches, are dealing with to try to get the kids to be able to play for however long we can make this work. So many thanks to them.
Okay, thanks, Jen. The only thing I have is you know what? I'm going to save that. I have nothing. Okay.
Nancy?
Yes.
I just wanted to add something to what Jen said. I'd like to thank ECAT also for showing so many of the competitions that have been able to take place among the sports teams. It's really nice to be able to access those various competitions remotely. So I just wanted to give them some acknowledgement. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody. At this time, we are going to enter into executive session to discuss strategies with respect for collective bargaining with all units, A, B, paraprofessionals, food service, custodial, secretary, and clerical. And to discuss this in the school committee meeting would be detrimental to our bargaining stance. We are going to return to open session, hopefully quite soon. So we are going to leave and come back. I need, I'm going to make that motion. I need a second.
O'Neill, second.
There is somebody who had posted in the Q&A right after we looked at public comment. I'm wondering if we should address that now before we switch over.
I believe her question has been answered, but go ahead, Chrissy. Go ahead.
Okay.
Sure. So this is from Beth Conley, Randall Street. First of all, thank you for the hard work you're doing this year. Apologies in advance if this has been asked previously, but will there be a date where you will decide that the children will definitely not be going back full time for this school year? Thank you. I also wanted to mention what an amazing job my son's teacher, Miss Hill at Parkview, and her facilitator, Mrs. Sarnecki, are doing. They are absolutely amazing.
Oh, that's very nice, and I'm sure they appreciate that shout out. You know, and I don't mean this to in a disrespectful or snarky way by any means. I think that's a great question. But what I would say is, as soon as somebody can tell me when COVID is gone, is when I would be able to give a definite answer about when school's coming back. Now, I'm not saying COVID has to be gone completely for us to be able to go back. And I don't mean that in a flippant way. I just mean that's how difficult it is to predict. There's so many things that can happen. We could surge here. We may have to close schools if we had any huge outbreak. Believe me, if we see spread in any of our schools, we're not keeping them open. So that would be a huge confounding factor. It's just, I would love to give you, I'm sorry, I don't remember the name, but I would love to give you that answer, ma'am, but I just have no idea. And it pains me to say that because we live our lives being as detail oriented and planning for as many things as possible in many different scenarios. And so unfortunately, I don't have the answer to that. I can't give definite dates on anything.
And there is one more question from Ginger LeMay, 77 King Arthur Road. Does the district have a sense of the percentage of teachers planning to receive the COVID-19 vaccine once available?
That is an excellent question. I didn't put vaccine update on this agenda because we have an active survey open right now with staff that doesn't end until tomorrow. But we did do a preliminary non-committal survey with staff to give us an idea on the town side of how prepared we need to be. And we received, just to give you context first, 30 to 50% has been the estimate of all the subgroups before us to date, first responders, medical professionals, et cetera, of people that have received the vaccine when it was provided to them. 85% of our staff expressed interest in it. That has created a subsequent survey from the town that now is more specific, that we're assessing information so that we are ready when and if the time comes that those are available. If anybody's been following this at the state level, it has been a little bit of a mess in terms of getting the vaccine to the sites. But I am very proud to say that the cooperation we have with the Board of Health, the town of Easton, our first responders, we have been meeting and we already have a plan in place. So we're ready as soon as those vaccines come. We just don't know exactly when that will be. But when it could be a split, you know, I've used an example with my husband, who's a first responder. He literally got a phone call from his department saying, you have 20 minutes to come down and get this shot if you want it. That could be the case, but we want to be as prepared as possible. Who are the people that want it? Are they prepared? You know, have they spoken to their medical providers? Do they know that it's the decision for them? Have they been informed? We've been sending them research and information. And the survey that ends tomorrow, which is more committal, is I think as of today, we had over 400 responses. We have 578 staff members. So obviously that 85% is holding pretty firm. So again, they still have another day. So you know, I can report out on that at the next school committee meeting, but it's a great question. Thank you for asking it. It definitely shows the interest our staff have in getting the vaccine and getting back into school with our kids.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor to go into executive session and then return? I need a roll call vote.
O'Neill, yes.
Grants, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
Okay, we'll be back in a few minutes, hopefully.